Howdy Neighbors, David here. And today on Boondock Stallions, we're going to be taking a look at timelines. Now, specifically, we're going to be taking a look at the timeline on AhsokaTano from The Mandalorian versus where she ended on Rebels. Then we're going to talk about Captain America and where he ended in Endgame, because I seem like there's still a lot of confusion about that, and I'd like to clear it up as best I can. Hopefully, some of you might agree, maybe some of you won't. And then we're going to talk about Back to the Future, because I'm working on a Back to the Future theory and how they all affect different timelines. So let's start with Ahsoka Tano. Now, there's been a lot of controversy as to where she lines up in The Mandalorian. Is she pre her showing up in the season finale or series finale of Rebels? Is it after Rebels? What's going on? And I don't understand why there's so much confusion. It's Star Wars. We should never, ever expect it to come out linear. It's not going to happen. So we can assume that as Ahsoka is looking for Bridger, let's stop with the assuming. Let's go ahead and dive right into speculation and guesswork. The way I think it's going down, what I think they're doing with Ahsoka is she's only going to be in that one episode of The Mandalorian, and she's not going to come back again until maybe the first episode of season 3. But I think that this was a nice stepping stone in the direction of getting her own series. And when I say her own series and what that might do, her series could be considered a sequel series to Star Wars Rebels, because they could start off with Ahsoka at the very end of, like I said, the series finale of Rebels, and then just do that whole scene, a live action, where she picks up Satine and they both leave Lothal and go off and hunt for Ezra. And the hunt for Ezra could be what's going on, because we know that Thrawn's back from what we just saw in the last episode of The Mandalorian. So if Thrawn's back, then we can assume that Ezra has to be either not far behind or possibly even not alive. And I know everybody was thinking that Ahsoka dies at some point before Rise of Skywalker, but that's not necessarily true. I know we heard Ahsoka's voice at the very end talking with Rey, and that could just be her using the Force to project her voice across the universe, the way they've done in episode 3 when Palpatine was talking to Anakin about not letting them kill him because he needed him to use his powers to save his wife, or the way Vader was trying to get Luke to join him at the very end of The Empire Strikes Back. And speaking of The Empire Strikes Back, that's kind of what they're doing with the seasons of The Mandalorian. They've said that they're going to mirror the original trilogy. Season 1 was going to mirror A New Hope. Season 2 would mirror Empire Strikes Back. And we've already got some of that going on, even with an old Jedi showing up and not wanting to train a new apprentice and sending them on a journey. So what we could see at the end is Moff Gideon could in fact kidnap Grogu in the season finale, leading to The Empire Strikes Back kind of awful, tragic end. And then we jump into season 3, and Ahsoka's back and Bo-Katan's back, and they team up to go and save Grogu from I almost said Darth Gideon. I'm so sorry. Moff Gideon. And so that's just, once again, stepping stones towards Ahsoka's own series. So, like I said, I'm pretty sure, call me 110% confident that Ahsoka in The Mandalorian takes place before Ahsoka at the season finale. I'm sorry, series finale. Damn it, I'm going to get that right one day, of Star Wars Rebels. So there's that timeline. Now let's talk about Captain America's timeline. I got the idea for Captain America's timeline during this whole Back to the Future thing that I'm working on. And so with everybody thinking that maybe Cap was in a parallel universe or in a different timeline, the way I read that movie, and like I said, this is my own personal speculation and revelations about the movie, but the way I read it, he went back in the timeline, not to when he left in Captain America, but to about 10 years later. It would have made the most sense because he had aged 10 years from Captain America to Endgame. So it would, why would he, I mean, obviously in the male fantasy, you would go back to your girlfriend at her youngest age, but Captain America is not that kind of guy. He would go back and find his old girlfriend at their current age. And as Even the show Agent Carter never really specified who she ended up with, and Captain America 2, even when they bury her, don't show you pictures of her husband and anything of her other life, maybe some pictures of the kids, but you don't really know who her husband is. So my thoughts were that when Steve came back, what he did was he assumed the identity of one of his fallen comrades, somebody maybe that we know, maybe somebody that we don't know, that was there in the background of the first Captain America story that just died, random red shirt number 5 in the background, took his identity and just worked deep underground for S.H.I.E.L.D. And with Peggy. So that's my thought. And I mean, he stayed in the Prime timeline also. Almost forgot to mention that. He stayed in the Prime timeline. He was just there in the background the whole time, not messing with events. So this brought me back to the Back to the Future timeline theory. In the Back to the Future movies, there are a million little plot holes, and the theory goes that all of these plot holes in the movie aren't actually plot holes, like Doc conveniently having the camera and knowing to speak into the camera and say all the specific details that would be needed for the 1955 version of the Doc to work on the time machine, how they knew about the lightning strike. All of these little things were convenient. I mean, they were super convenient plot holes, but the theory goes that they weren't actually in the Prime timeline when we watch the movie. From the beginning of the movie, when we see Marty go to Doc's shop and plug it in the guitar, this is all the second version of the timeline in the Back to the Future series. As the theory goes, Doc met a time traveler, and if you really want to go deep cut on this, you could count the what was the other actor that played Marty McFly before Michael J. Fox? Oh my God, I can't remember his name. Anyways, it was the guy from Mask. Anywho, he was the original Marty McFly, and in that timeline, he is just some random kid walking along in the parking lot at 1 a.m. as random kids do in the middle of the night. I was a teenager. I did the same thing. Happens upon this weird scientist in the middle of the parking lot, sees him get gunned down by the terrorist, hops in the car, and goes back in time while being chased by the terrorist on accident. He has no idea he's in a time machine. He has no idea that Doc Brown's being hunted by Livens. He has no idea any of this is going on. He just happened upon this. And when he went back in time, realizing that he was stuck in 1955, remembered the name Emmett Brown on the side of the van, realized the old man might be alive in this day, tracks him down, tells him the story. Doc doesn't believe him. Then he shows him the time machine and the flux capacitor. We know the story, how it plays out. Doc believes him, but this time there was, in the original timeline, there was no camcorder, no paper saying save the clock tower with the time that it was going to be struck by lightning, giving Doc all the key points he would need to send Marty to the future. And in this timeline, Marty's stuck. There is no getting back to the future. He has to live in this timeline. He has to just kind of go off into the background and live a quiet life. Or even at best, since he knew some history to come, he could live off in the background and not be noticed enough to affect the major timeline. There's even one thought that he might be Huey Lewis, and that's why we hear Power of Love in the background and Marty playing Power of Love in the, it's one of those weird meta wibbly wobbly timey wimey things. But so the Doc, realizing that Marty's going to be stuck there, feels guilty and decides that he can take measures and steps to make sure that when he got to 1985, he could send that version of Marty, because it's a fixed point in time. That loop is always going to happen. But this time, the Doc can send him back with all the tools necessary to make sure that he could send him back to the future. So let me know what you think down in the comments. If you haven't already, please subscribe to this video, share, tune in next week, and be excellent to each other, dudes.